Unfortunately, these numbers will keep increasing every day if we do not adopt safe road user behavior.
Tukisalia katika eneo hilo la kati ni kwamba kongamano la ardhi ya jamii za wafugaji linalofanyika Nanyuki linaingia siku ya 3 na ya mwisho hii leo. Huku washikadau kutoka mataifa ya Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki wakitarajiwa kusoma mapendekezo yao kuhusu usajili na umiliki wa ardhi ya jamii za wafugaji. Hebu tusikilize kile kinachoendelea katika kongamano hilo ili tuweze kufahamu ni yapi ambayo ni mapendekezo yao.
Netly affect indigenous people, men, women, boys and girls, and persons with disability, reduce land productivity, increased poverty, hunger, weaken resilience and adaptation capacities, and at times have to bear the burden of climate mitigation action and efforts implemented by governments such as evictions from our land and territories to pave way for green energy projects, solar, wind and hydropower projects implemented without the FPIC. Lack of national and sub-national county level coordination mechanism, policies and strategies for livestock production, marketing and value addition, especially among the pastoralist communities, exposing them to major losses of their livelihood due to climate hazards such as drought. Inadequate degradation data on indigenous people, social and economic aspects to inform the understanding of their needs and potential remains a key hindrance to responsive policies on pastoralism, livelihood and conservation.
As IPs, we commit to stand up and speak loudly and defend our rights to land and natural resources through rightful structures of governments and regional and international instruments, and embrace ADR in resolving land disputes. Pursue with great importance and the urgency the registration and legal recognition of collective land rights, and pursue justice for land lost through historical and current injustices. Participate actively in all decision-making bodies to engage policymakers and inform policies, strategies and actions on IPs. Document and disseminate our indigenous knowledge in advancing the conservation and sustainable livelihoods. Proactively conserve, protect and restore our land and natural ecosystems for sustainable access to ecosystem services needed to secure our livelihoods and conservation of biodiversity. Embrace new technologies that strengthen our capacity to improve our livelihoods and conserve, complement diversity in a wake of land degradation and climate change to make them more resilient. Call on government and development actors to harmonize, implement, review and develop policies that provide for legal recognition, livelihood development for IPs through community-led biodiversity conservation anchored in knowledge and practice, embracing climate change adaptation. Document and register all IP lands for formal recognition of their tenure rights as key ingredient for rangeland management, conservation, pastoralism development, e.g. in Kenya and other East African countries. Extend the principle of free, prior and informed consent as ruled once and for all by the East African Court in June 2022 as applying to IPs, to all land and water dependent local communities, and applied in all proposals which affect local land and water resources. Embrace and enforce the implementation of epic and fair, meaningful compensation that takes into account the right value of IP land, its bundles of rights, and avoid commodification of land, e.g. need for fair pay for annual rent and not one-time compensation for long-term use of land, e.g. for infrastructure, and developed trade in carbon credit for fair compensation is not and should never be adequate to corporate social responsibility. Prioritize access to justice to resolve historical and current land injustices, including those related to conservation through compensation, repatriation, and restitution for the loss of land, territories, and livelihoods by IPs without HIPIC, by established robust grievance and redress mechanisms that are transparent, fair, and promote access to justice and rights for IPs. Fast track the conclusion of pending court cases, e.g. in Kenya, Uganda, and East Africa countries, and implementation of decisions on IPs land rights that are still pending in Kenya, e.g. in Rois and Oge communities. Expand and where applicable, provide for affirmative action for better inclusion of IPs and gender mainstreaming in key decisions that impacts their land and natural resources, livelihoods, and conservation efforts. Promote integrated land and rangeland management across borders initiatives, e.g. 2019 Kenya-Uganda Karamoja Natural Resource Sharing Agreements, gathered tradition among Borana, use of totems and others for strategies and programs that enhance water and pasture and other ecosystem services for sustainable use and management for pastoral lands. Promote and strengthen IP's capacity in gender-responsive alternative dispute resolutions to advance their land and natural resources rights. Strengthen IP's capacity in gender-responsive climate mitigation, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction to reduce exposure on climate change-induced hazards, early warning, use of green energy, water harvesting, destocking, etc. Promote and strengthen capacities of IPs in adoption of gender-responsive new technology in rangeland management for livelihoods and ecosystem conservation to improve, implement, complement, and diversify traditional livelihood systems and approaches such as provision of insurance cover for livestock, more productive fodder crop, and removal of invasive species. Legally protect the intellectual property rights for indigenous peoples at national and regional levels. Follow up and implement COP27 decision on loss and damage. Develop, review policies that promote livestock production, market access, value chain development in rangelands, including cross-border livestock trade and off-taking programs.
Na hizo ni jamii za wafugaji ambazo zinazungumzia masuala mbalimbali yanayofungamana na masuala ya ardhi, vile vile masuala ya mabadiliko ya tabia nchi, vile ambavyo yamekuwa yakiwaathiri wao kama jamii ambazo ni za wafugaji, hususan zile jamii asili ambazo zimekuwa zikizungumzia zikitaka kuweza kutekelezwa kwa kikamilifu kwa miongoni mwa masuala ambayo yaliweza kuidhinishwa katika kongamano la vyama ama kongamano la mataifa la 27